Coming up this week on Sporting Journal Radio. Well, there's some big news regarding forward-facing sonar in the tournament world.
Boy, that's going to be welcome news to a number of folks.
I'm afraid that that's where it's going to end up.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Broadcasting on the Sporting Journal Radio Network, wherever you get your podcasts or watch on YouTube.
Fish on right now.
Well, we're here at the 2024 Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic, presented by OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. And our guest now is Jeremy Smith. I fish, I hunt, and always will.
It's just to look out for your everyday hunter, angler, and trapper that's out there.
A Fish Hunt Forever production. This is Sporting Journal Radio. Well, two big tournament companies, fishing organizations, have made some changes to rules regarding forward-facing sonar. You've probably heard about them already. We'll break down some of that and give you our thoughts on some of these changes coming up this week. Also, Joe Henry will have a Lake of the Woods fishing report. We'll talk to John Devney from Delta Waterfowl. It's always great to have John on the show, and man, we love talking about ducks and duck hunting, and I'm sure we'll get into the length of season here in Minnesota. And Dan, I have a feeling, that's Dan Amundsen over there. What's up, Dan?
Hey.
I have a feeling I'm going to eat my words a little bit this year with the length, wanting to have a later duck season. But, I think overall, later is going to be more fun and better for hunters out there. We'll talk about all of that coming up on this week's show and recap how our early teal season, that gong show of an early teal season, how that went, all coming up on this week's show. First, Dan, who are the sponsors?
Invergrove Toyota is the official truck sponsor of Fish Hunt Forever. And looking for your new rig, head to Invergrove Toyota. Lake of the Woods Tourism. Lake of the Woods is the walleye capital of the world. Plan a trip for this fall or ice fishing at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. OnX Hunt. See private land boundaries, recent imagery, offline maps, and Minnesota-specific hunt layers. Download the OnX Hunt app today. Tazen Lake Lodge. Catch world record lake trout and giant pike at Saskatchewan's Tazen Lake. Learn more at tazenlake.com. Devil's Lake, North Dakota. Catch it all at Devil's Lake. Go for a casting blast in North Dakota. Prairie Sportsman, new season is wrapped up, but we're filming new episodes right now, actually, and you can watch episodes anytime at the Prairie Sportsman YouTube channel. Haybell Heights Campground and Resort, Fish Devil's Lake this summer and fall. Learn more at haybellheights.com. And Guardian Eagle Resort, plan a trip for next year to go fish the Ontario waters of Guardian Eagle Resort. You can fly directly from the Twin Cities. Learn more at guardianeagle.com.
Video of the week. So, video of the week, it's we're a little biased on this option because it's one of ours. We have a new Raising Tiny video that is available now on the Fish Hunt Forever YouTube channel. So while you go there, check that out. And then also, there's another one that I was going to plug later in the show, but you might as well check this one out too. Bassmaster has all the classics on YouTube. I didn't realize that they had this. And they have one from 1971. I don't know if that was the first one or the first one that they have a video of or what, but it's pretty amazing watching the Bassmaster Classic from 1971. You can find that on the Bassmaster YouTube channel. And then while you're on there on the Fish Hunt Forever channel, make sure you subscribe and share it with all your buddies. And then we did one from Guardian Eagle Resort up in Ontario, which was just some amazing walleye fishing. You can see us catching walleyes at will while we were up there. They're just wrapping up the season. In fact, they just closed up there. GuardianEagle.com is the website. They've got 75,000 acres of private water, and you can fly direct from Minneapolis and land right at their lodge. They got a concrete runway right at the lodge. There's a plane that you fly in right there, and it's just super slick. We flew from the Anoka County Airport in Blaine, and then just stop in Fort Francis to clear customs, and then we didn't even get off the plane. Put the plane back up in the air, and then we were landing at the lodge and looking at walleyes at the dock within just a couple of hours of leaving the Twin Cities. So learn more at guardianeagle.com. All right, Dan, early teal season in the books now.
Yep.
What were your thoughts?
One thought to a lot of hunters out there.
Stop breaking the law!
I have to cut that off.
I'm glad you cut off the last
part.
part.
Where that is, but read the regulations, please. There's a lot of early shooting from people that we confirmed were teal hunting. I put some stuff on the social media, and then some people saying, "Oh, they might have been dove hunters, might have been goose hunters." They weren't. Yeah. And I know we weren't the only ones experiencing that, but you can't shoot teal till sunrise during teal season. So that was frustrating. And I don't have a problem with the teal season. I can enjoy it. It's another great hunting opportunity for people who like early season duck hunting. But remember, this isn't a confirmed thing that's going to happen in the future. So if you want to keep it, if you want it to stick around, if you want to have it again next year,
Stop breaking the law!
I think we explained it. It was a 3-year experimental teal season in Minnesota. And then this year, they extended it an extra year with no data collection, which I get because they're compiling all the data from the 3 previous years, and then they're going to probably continue it. I mean, most likely the teal season will become a fixture here in Minnesota unless there are enough people against it. My thoughts that I've made public many, many times, if you're going to have it, open it up and then push the regular season opener back into October, because normally all you really see are blue-winged teal around here, the occasional green-wing, the occasional mallard, and obviously some wood ducks. Dan, I was shocked at the amount of mallards we saw.
There are a lot of mallards. There are a lot of wood ducks. We thought we probably saw some gadwall around too. Mm-hmm. So a lot of ducks. It's actually going to be kind of fun for any youth that are duck hunting this weekend. They might get a fun mixed bag. So that'll be kind of exciting for any kids that are going duck hunting this weekend. That's more fun than just shooting teal. So have fun banging away at some ducks out there.
Here's what's going to happen, because when you have an early teal season, the early Canada goose season, youth waterfowl, all of that, and then an early opener like this year, September 21st here in Minnesota, the opening regular season waterfowl, you're going to push all the local birds out. You're going to put a lot of pressure on them. That is going to be, 3+ weeks of shooting at these birds, whether you shot at a definitely some people shot at mallards and wood ducks and spoonies and all kinds of other ducks during the early teal season. It definitely happened. There were some mistake ducks. Now, the DNR has said that has stayed below the 10% threshold, which is what they've been watching to determine how many mistake ducks are killed. If it stays below the 10%, I believe it's 10%, stays below that threshold, then it's a small enough amount of mistake ducks that they can continue the early teal season. But those birds, I mean, we had a flock of 30 mallards land while we were shooting at, while we were teal hunting. And then those 30 mallards are swimming around the decoys. When a teal comes in, somebody shoots at the teal. Well, now those mallards, they don't know that we're not shooting at them. Now they're getting bumped. They didn't come back to that pond. They're going somewhere else. They might stay in the area for a little bit. They get a strong north wind, they might be gone. Or if they get shot at that next pond, or shot, gunshots going off near them at that next pond. So this is going to put a lot of pressure on these birds. And what happens every year around the opener, whether it's the beginning of October or the end of September, whatever, the local birds get pressured, and after enough pressure, they move on. And then you have a lull until the migrators show up. Now, some people will argue about when the migrators start showing up, and it all depends on which part of the state you're in. We're about middle of the state, western side, and we don't normally really see, you might see some tricklers coming in mid-October, but there's usually a lull in that first half of October. And, looking at the forecast, Dan, next week it's going to be 90 degrees pretty much all week long. Nobody's going to want to go hunting, waterfowl hunting of any kind. Obviously, goose would be the only thing they could do. They might keep some doves around. But
poor deer hunters, bear hunters.
Oh my gosh, could you imagine having to skin a bear in 90 degrees? Or sit in a stand out there? Man. So right now, to me, you're better off if you want to extend the teal season a little bit to give people an opportunity to hunt ducks in September. Great, because normally we don't have all these other ducks around like all these mallards. We've just been so wet this year, and other areas have been dry that I think a lot of ducks stayed in Minnesota or ended up here because of all the water. Normally we don't have that, so you're going to have all these ducks getting pressured. They're going to get bumped. They're going to go somewhere else. They might migrate. Enough pressure and some weather probably will push them out. And then you have to sit and wait for the migrators anyway. And that mid-November here is when things really start to get really good. All the Canada geese come down. All the northern, the mallards that are up north, they start to show up. And next thing you know, you got big, fatty mallards all over the place. You got lots of Canada geese. The field hunting gets really, really good. And to me, especially if you want to talk about table fare, yes, teal this time of year can be okay if they're starting to layer up with some fat. Even the ones that don't have a lot of fat aren't bad. But the mallards, like these mallards, they're all brown ducks. They don't look good. They don't have a lot of fat on them. They're not as good at table fare. I'd much rather shoot a mallard in November. And so even with the way things are right now, I'd much rather see a later opener. And we're going to talk to John Devaney more about that coming up later. I didn't mean to go on this rant this week, Dan.
Sure,
I know
you're
just kind of sitting over there waiting for me to stop talking, but I don't know. And then, of course, we had guys on a pond right next to us shooting a half hour early, and their justification was, well, somebody shot before us. Well, that doesn't make it okay for you to start shooting teal before it's legal to do it. So you got to follow the regs, people. Quit breaking the law. Blankety blank. All right. We're going to talk about
I'd already hit the button enough times. I didn't want to hit it.
I was waiting for it one more time.
I just like letting you hang out to dry. You said you've been so wet this year. I'm letting you dry out.
Bassmaster made some changes to forward-facing sonar. We'll tell you what those are if you don't know and what we think about it coming up when we come back here on Sporting Journal Radio. And don't forget, if you're looking for a world-class walleye fishing destination this fall, maybe a cast and blast trip, check out Devil's Lake, North Dakota, where the walleye bite is always strong. Call it Catch It All at Devil's Lake. Visit devilslakend.com to learn more and plan your next trip to Devil's Lake, North Dakota. Now is the time to start thinking about chasing big walleyes on Devil's Lake. Get on the fish at Haybale Heights Campground and Resort. Haybale Heights makes it easy for you to make memories on legendary Devil's Lake with guided fishing and lodging packages. Or bring your own boat and rent one of their cabins on East Bay. Haybale Heights offers a private marina, fish cleaning station, and the opportunity to relax and enjoy your bucket list trip to Devil's Lake, North Dakota. To book your trip, visit haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com. Headlines. Well, there's some big news regarding forward-facing sonar in the tournament world. Bassmaster has announced some changes to the upcoming Bassmaster Elite Series tournaments. One live imaging transducer allowed per boat, and it has to be on your trolling motor. There'll be a list of approved transducers updated annually. They'll have a 55-inch screen limit between your dash and bow mount. So only 55 inches of screens allowed on the boats. Only one electric motor per boat, so no brakes. Also, they're going to try to come out with a new schedule to diversify fishing a little bit so anglers won't be able to use forward-facing sonar as much as they do now currently. There was some announcements made about it. Tommy Sanders and Davey Height break down the new rules. Davey was part of the committee that came up with these new rules. He spent time at each tournament this year talking to anglers and examining how many transducers they were using, how many screen inches they had, and what other tech they were using. And they just asked people and got opinions from everybody about what to do moving forward. And they felt that the new rules moving forward were a good compromise.
This will create a level playing field. However, the one transducer on the front of the boat, in my personal opinion, I don't think it'll affect the way we see the anglers fish. I think they'll still use it. You just won't have so many different transducers being used on the boats.
And one of the most difficult parts about live imaging is, where do you draw the line for technology? What impact is live scope or other forward-facing sonar actually having? Now, they kept hearing about how different this is compared to GPS or side imaging, etc.
This technology is so different than anything we've seen before, and that's why people get so excited. You know, I've heard people, say this. They banned the Alabama rig. They should have banned side imaging, but I truly think that most anglers that have used this technology thinks that this is very different, and that's why we took it so seriously, and we spent so much time throughout the year looking at the decision of what to do going forward.
Now, what I like about this ruling is that even though they acknowledge just how different forward-facing sonar is, they didn't ban it. They just try to keep everyone at the same level. Obviously, there's some sponsors and some money involved that probably influence that decision a little bit. But they try to keep everybody at the same level. It's almost like NASCAR, where you have certain limits on engine and horsepower and component and even steering wheel size or mirror size, things like that. They try to keep everybody on the same playing field. It also sends a message that the technology itself isn't a big enough problem for game management agencies to have to worry about it. Now, they are going to keep an eye on the future, however, to see if live imaging does have any negative impacts on the fisheries.
It is long-term effects, and no one really knows. I have opinions. Everyone has those about how it may or may not affect our fisheries, and that's a big thing. You hear people talk about every professional sport has limitations to maybe hold back somebody from being able to do things that's never been done before in the sport. You know, certainly that in golf and professional baseball, football, all those sports. The thing that we have different is a resource that we need to be concerned about. And I definitely look forward to being on this committee and looking at the future impacts on the resources.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing right there. But my issue is that if they truly cared about the long-term effects on the resources, they'd look into catch and release style formats versus transporting fish for hours across a body of water, bounced around a live well, onto a stage for a weigh-in, and then released in a different part of the lake. Ultimately, these rules are going to appease some of the live imaging naysayers and then try to keep the fish IQ high for the tournament anglers.
I think everyone involved in this world hopes, along with you, that we can somehow make sure that hard work and time on the water and developing your skill set and being able to execute it remain the most important elements to success in this game. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
100%, Tommy. I've always felt like that, even way back in the day when I was using flashers into today is September 2024. More time on the water, more experience, more time using the tools that you have available makes you a better angler. And that is no different now than it was 30 years ago.
Dan, do you think this is going to keep everybody happy?
Has anyone ever, has everyone ever been happy in the world of fishing? No. So no, it won't. And there's a lot of things there. Like I don't really have a problem with this, but there's a few things here that it's like, that kind of, I don't know. They're weird to me. Like what he just said, it's all about spending time on the water, getting better at what you do. Well, maybe if some of these anglers would stop being so stubborn and say, I don't like forward-facing sonar, so I'm just not going to use it. Well, that's fine. Maybe if you use it and got good at it, used it more, you'd understand it, and you could compete with some of these people that have taken advantage of it and gotten good at it. Now they're winning these derbies. But, it's interesting. No, not everyone's going to be happy, and there's still going to be people that want it banned outright, and there's people that are going to want to put 7 transducers on their boat, whatever. I hope somebody, just for the fun of it, like a guy like Matt Robertson shows up with a 55-inch flat screen TV on his boat just for his one unit, just for fun. So I don't know. It's weird. It's interesting. And I think this has now opened the door for every other tournament organization to put restrictions on this technology. Bass is arguably the largest tournament organization in the world. So now what does the future hold for MLF? What does the future hold for NWT, MWC? Obviously we heard about NFPL,
the National Professional Fishing League,
NPFL, whatever.
NPFL.
But I had literally never heard of this organization until they banned forward-facing sonar. So good job at making yourselves relevant all of a sudden.
That's probably what they did. They probably did it on purpose to get.
Nobody knows who we are. We got to get in the headlines.
What do you think the DNR will think about this situation?
It's a good question. I guess, I don't know.
Because, the fact that they didn't ban it, I think it shows that they're not really necessarily worried about the impact on fish. And as one person, these posts on Facebook have just hundreds of comments on them. And one guy commented that there's no actual studies out there that show that forward-facing sonar has had a negative impact on fish populations. There's some anecdotal stories of people who say, oh, well, I can't catch them like I used to. Well, you can't necessarily blame that on forward-facing sonar necessarily, but
I can tell you this, that if the DNR starts carrying around a tape measure when they check my life jackets and my throwable, and then they take a tape measure to the screens on my boat to make sure I'm under 55 inches,
I don't think you'll see changes like that for the average angler.
I didn't think I'd see a change like that in a tournament. I never thought we'd see a screen length limit.
Well, and from the sounds of it, that's due to insurance companies talking about safety. So it's not necessarily to give, obviously there's going to be some advantages to having a bigger screen at times, but I think guys were having multiple screens up on the bow of their boat, and the bigger they get and the higher they get, you're starting to block your view when you're driving your boat. So I think insurance companies had more of an influence on that rule. Are we
going to require windshield wipers on our boats pretty soon? There's a giant blind spot when you get hit with weight. Where does that? It's just. I'm not completely against these regulations. If it's a way to try to compromise, that's great.
Yeah.
But there's just some weird things about it. That's what I'll say.
I was surprised about the boat brake ban. I mean, I guess you can combine it with live scope to help you target individual fish, but when you're talking about boat control, I was kind of surprised at that.
Well, and there was some things, like I think it said in the release that it was those boat breaks were aiding and making it harder to determine whether some anglers are really long lining or trolling. Like this strolling moping technique is really taken off with live scope, and I'm not an expert in this by any means, but you're not supposed to troll in these bass tournaments, and so now you're adding these electric motors and more electric motors, and so where do you start drawing the line on what's trolling and what's just dropping a bait vertically and not trolling? Even though you're keeping your bait in the water and maybe moving forward, trying to get presented over a school of fish on your forward-facing sonar. So I think that's part of that. But I don't really know. I've never used brakes. I've not really ever done the strolling thing. I don't really go catch bass deep like that. So
I'm curious to see what they do with the opens. They didn't really make them part of the announcement. See if they make any changes there for those. And somebody commented that the viewership is up for Bassmaster. So you hear people complain about all you do is you look at the guy's back as he's staring out at the screen. Well, you're looking at the guy's back most of the time when they're bass fishing, whether they're looking at a forward-facing sonar screen or not. And obviously that's not going to change since they're going to have a screen to look at up on their trolling mount, forward-facing sonar there. So ultimately, there won't be much change there. So you're still going to have some naysayers, I think, on all of that. And as you mentioned earlier, this announcement comes just a couple of days after the NPFL outright banned live imaging. They felt, as they said, they needed a total ban because they're saying it's become an expensive video game that limited the style of fishing and the amount of lures used. So you are having some lure manufacturing companies out there probably complaining about this too, because they're not selling, because people are going for all these baits that will show up better on live sonar. They said, we considered intermediate measures that fell short of a complete restriction, but believed they would be insufficient to protect the sport. Limiting transducers or screens or only allowing the technology on certain days or hours are half measures that may quiet some opponents of the technology, but they are unlikely to reduce its impact. So some disagreements in the tournament world. We'll see what the future may hold. Do you think, Dan, this will impact the NWT at all?
Well, I'll be curious to see. We talked to Ken Anderson a couple of weeks ago, and he alluded to the dark cloud hanging over the NWT and that being in a shaky spot. And he didn't go into detail. So, I'm not in a position to talk really about what's going on there. I don't know a whole lot. I have some ideas of what might be going on there. But if a tournament like that were to all of a sudden throw this rule out, when you have a bunch of anglers that are trying to make their living using forward-facing sonar, you look at the John Hoyers, Eric McCoy's always running live scope. A lot of these top anglers have been using live scope when you're watching these videos, and it's a lot of the older guys, more traditional guys that are still trolling or using some other techniques, but hasn't been winning a lot of tournaments. So if the NWT were to come out and do something like that, I think you might see a group of anglers say, you know what, this along with some of the other drama going on here, screw it, we're going to leave. And if somebody was smart, they'd swoop in and form another derby, or they'd jump into AIM, or who knows. But there's already enough shakiness there.
I think they all just need to use what they used in 1971 during this Bassmaster Classic on Lake Mead.
All 24 of these Rebel fastback bass boats are identically equipped, so nobody has an equipment advantage. Each boat has a Lowrance depth sounder, fish locator and fishing temp, a foot-operated motor guide electric trolling motor, a 90 horsepower inboard-outboard motor, and an Anchormate anchor. Roland Martin, who won the Barnett tournament, finished second in two others and eighth in another this year, relies heavily on electronic aids when he's trying to locate fish. Roland is typical of the new breed of scientific bass fishermen. The man who studies maps, uses his depth sounder, water temperature indicator, and even a Rube Goldberg kind of instrument he built himself called a water clarity meter.
It's amazing to see how technology has advanced over the years. And I'll tell you, I loved using my live scope up at Tasman Lake Lodge to catch some of those big lake trout and search for those big pike. It's absolutely amazing. And you can go there and do it too. Trophy lake trout, northern pike in scenic northern Saskatchewan, waiting for you at Tasman Lake Lodge. The guys are up there for the fall spawn right now, actually. I'm real jealous about it. You can get a trip booked for 2025 right now just by going to tasmanlake.com. We got Joe Henry with a Lake of the Woods fishing report when we come back.
Hunting season will be here before you know it, and it's time to get ready for your next adventure with the OnX Hunt app. Whether you're traveling in search of roosters, elk, waterfowl, or looking to score on a whitetail close to home, OnX Hunt can help you be more successful this season. Route, plan, and navigate with private and public land boundaries, recent imagery, offline maps, and Minnesota-specific hunt layers. Download the Hunt app on the App Store or Google Play and join the millions of hunters that trust OnX Hunt.
All right, now it's time to head up to that big walleye factory in northern Minnesota to get a fishing report from Lake of the Woods with Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods Tourism. Joe, how you doing?
Hey, Brett, I'm doing good, man. How are you?
First question, are the shiners running? Everyone wants to know.
I hear reports that there are some shiners running. In fact,
really?
I heard that there's some shiners, emerald shiners already up to Birchdale. Now, with that being said, it's not the big fall run yet, but I will tell you this. There's a couple of things. If you like fishing the Rainy River in the fall, there's a couple things working in our favor. You know, and not all of this is 100% scientific in the sense of some of it is just based on experience watching past years, but none of it's fact. It's always Mother Nature in control. First off, we got pretty good current on the Rainy River. Normally, the years we've had the better fall runs where you get a lot of big fish running up the river after those shiners, normally that's when there's some current, and we got current this year. Number two, we already got some shiners up the river. We know there's some in the river, all the way up to Birchdale, I mentioned. That's a long ways up. That's 42 miles from the mouth of where the river dumps into the lake. And then finally, we have been talking to some anglers who have fished the river periodically, and they're actually getting some fairly nice walleyes, some nice 18 inches and such. And, you know, they thought those fish might be from the lake chasing some of those shiners up. Who knows if they are, if they're local walleyes, but nonetheless, that's pretty good fishing for walleyes in the river, which, you know, things will start in September, but it is early September. So things are looking pretty darn good. I can tell you this, there's already schools of shiners, you know, and also walleyes, nice walleyes, out in front of the Lighthouse Gap and out in front of Pine Island. And it seems like some of those walleyes are starting to gravitate a little bit closer to shore, which is another telltale sign, which is it's a good walleye movement to have in the fall.
Having that river there is such an asset to that fishery. I mean, obviously the lake is a great lake to be fishing and going out on charter boats, even when it's a little windy out there is fine. But being able to have the river to go fish as well, and then in the fall and the spring when all those big fish start loading up in there, man, what a great opportunity to catch some fish here in Minnesota.
It offers that spring opportunity, you know, for listeners. You remember we got that extended spring season that goes through April 14th for walleyes. It's one of the longest seasons in the state. Usually the walleye season closes at the end of February in most parts of Minnesota. The fact that we go through April 14th, that provides a good opportunity in the Rainy River that opens up at the end of March typically. And then, of course, in the fall, we get the emerald shiners. And we don't know exactly why they run in the fall up the river, but traditionally, each fall, the emerald shiners will run from the lake up the river, and those walleyes obviously are close behind, and that creates what we call the fall run of walleyes on the Rainy River. And then the other thing that's kind of cool about the river is that there are local fish in there in the summer and in the winter, too, for some of the people that have nowhere to go to, where the ice is safe to ice fish it. But yeah, so there's walleyes in there year-round. It's just that we get those extra blasts of walleyes in the spring and in the fall. And you know, if we're talking about the Rainy River, I mean, we can't not mention sturgeon and how good the sturgeon fishing is. We're catching sturgeon now. We've been catching them all summer, and usually the sturgeon bite only gets better as the water starts to cool down. So that'll be getting better also. It's just kind of it's also a neat time on the river. I mean, the river is small water, so you know, if you have a 16 or 18 foot boat or something, you can certainly pull your own boat up there and fish the river very successfully. It's not a big river. You know, the current isn't crazy ripping, you know, like some rivers are, and you could easily manage it. And you know, you're gonna have your walleyes, your sturgeon, your saugers. You got some nice crappies in the river. You got some smallmouth. different kind of suckers and stuff, which people normally don't target. You know, we know that it's kind of a nursery for those eel pout because we catch those little eel pout in the spring. But during your Sporting Journal Radio 500, you know, it's just kind of a neat deal. Plus the migration's going on, the trees are beautiful. It's just a cool time if you've never done it. You want to talk about relaxing, being up there sitting around the fall, jigging or pulling cranks and just watching the migration and having a little bit of a nip in the air. Just cool, man.
Oh yeah, fall is great up there, and you know we've done cast and blast trips up there. In fact, that's how I got into a glow, was a cast and blast trip we took up there in 2019. We did some walleye fishing, and we also did some goose hunting up there. And of course, there's grouse hunting opportunities. There's diver hunting opportunities. The layout boat hunting opportunity up at the Northwest Angle. It is a neat area to be at this time of year, and it's all just getting started. And Joe, I want to ask you
right before you go too far. That grouse hunting in Beltrami Island State Forest, there are literally thousands and thousands of acres of public hunting land. And I can tell you that, you know, we shot a show for Prairie Sportsman last year, late October. And unfortunately, we got about 6 inches of snow just before we filmed. But I will tell you that most of the grouse season before that, getting a limit of grouse in a day was very common. There were so many birds, and we expected to be that good this year as well.
Yeah, it was unbelievable in Minnesota last year for grouse hunting. So we were so excited to go up there and do it. And I'm sure the local grouse hunters are probably happy that we got there right when it snowed to film a TV show, because it was tough hunting for us. But a healthy population of rough grouse up there, and I'm sure grouse hunters will have another great season. And when we spoke last week, Joe, we talked about the Pay It Forward event, and you were kind of mid-event when we talked to you. And I want to ask you about how it ended up and how people can be a part of it next year. But real quick, and I know you'll appreciate this because you're a Tundra driver, but I want to tell people, if you want to drive a new truck without spending $60,000, $80,000. I know it can get a little bit tough. The economy is a little tough right now. Well, then take a look at the Toyota Tacoma. It starts at just $36,195. It's the number one selling midsize truck in America. It sells more than Chevy Colorado, sells more than Ford Rangers combined. It's better than ever and all new for the 2024 model year. It tows up to 6,500 pounds, gets you where you need to go if you want to go hunting or fishing. It's a great rig for that. And for you, our Sporting Journal Radio and Fish Hunt Forever listeners, you get $250 off the lowest advertised price and an additional $500 for your trade-in, but you got to fill out the voucher at on our website. So find the link on our website or go to invergrovetoyota.com/FHF to save money on your next Toyota at Invergrove Toyota in Invergrove Heights, Minnesota, 494 and Roberts Street. Now, Joe, last week you had a great event for some veterans up there at Lake of the Woods. You were about mid-event when we talked to you last week. How did that end up? And we should tell people again how they can be a part of that next year.
Yeah, 100%. You know, we do an annual event called Pay It Forward. And the purpose of Pay It Forward is to honor, recognize, and celebrate all veterans. And, you know, we had about 90 people at this last week for our event. And it was the 11th annual Pay It Forward event. And I gotta tell you, man, it was magical once again. You know, we always say every event is a little bit different just because we have different personalities and such. But what an incredible event. I mean, these veterans, we owe them so much. And, you know, I was honored to be able to hear some of the stories that these veterans had. And, you know, I mean, one gentleman who was a Purple Heart, and he was a tunnel rat. And he'd get, he'd go in behind enemy lines. And another person that was a sabotage specialist, and they would use plastic explosives on trails and have to be up all night. And I mean, I go on. And you know, this was Vietnam I'm speaking of. But, you know, whether somebody has served overseas in sub-battle, whether they've never gone overseas and they were stateside, they're a veteran that dedicated their time to the United States of America. And when you hear some of these stories and some of the hardships and some of the nightmares, and you hear about people that have lost their lives both in the battlefield but also back home because they couldn't endure what they were going through when they came back. You know, when they say freedom isn't free, I tell you, you take it hits a little bit more home. And I just would really encourage everybody just to think about that once. You know, not to get too deep, right? But, you know, I'll tell you something. We live in the greatest country in the world, and we have people literally from across the world fighting to get here. The fact that we wake up every day and we are Americans. We have hit the lottery, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. Incredible event, man! Everybody caught walleyes and saugers and some pike and perch, and everybody caught fish. Most everybody took home a limit of walleyes and saugers. The big fish of the tournament for the veterans. I think the big fish. I think Terry and Karen Tuma, Tackle Terry Tuma. They're kind of ambassadors. Terry's a veteran himself, and they've been part of our event as ambassadors for all 11 years so far. Karen caught over a 28-inch walleye, but she doesn't get into the little contest we have for veterans. It's just veterans that are new to the program, and I think 27 3/4 was number 1, 27.5 was 2, and I think 27 or 27.25 was number 3. So some really nice walleyes. They weren't the 30 and 31 inches that they caught in some of the tournaments the week before that, but still some really, really nice walleyes. And all day we'll take it. I think Danny's right now on the screen is showing some of the pictures from the AIM Pro Walleye Minnesota Championship that was up there.
Yeah, look at the belly on that fish. Jeez, that last one.
Yeah, look at that one. I mean, look at the size of those fish. Those are the walleyes. I think pretty sure that most of the anglers are sharpshooting. They're driving around Lake of the Woods and looking for those big blobs and then picking them off. And even that takes a lot of talent. But no, the veterans event, Brett, was great. And I would say this: if you're a veteran, or if you know a veteran who might be interested in coming up to next year's paid forward event, 2025, we always hold it the week before Labor Day in August. And I just looked at the dates. Next year, it's August 25th to I think August 28th is a Thursday. People arrive on a Monday afternoon, get checked into your whichever resort you're staying at, and then we have a group dinner that evening. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, you wake up and have a good breakfast. You board a charter boat at about 8 in the morning. You go fishing with other veterans all day with a licensed charter captain, and you come to the dock at 5, get refreshed back at your cabin. And at 6 o'clock, we have our dinner. We this year we did Sportsman's Lodge for opening night. We did Riverbend Resort for the second night, where we had a fresh walleye feed right out on the patio of Riverbend overlooking the Rainy River. It was a beautiful night. Had a lot of veterans wanted to say a few words to their colleagues, and then the last night we did Borderview Lodge. They hosted the dinner there, and we had a beautiful Mexican night with enchiladas and tacos and good camaraderie, good guest speakers, just very magical. And then everybody wakes up on Thursday morning and has breakfast and heads for home. So it's a 3-night, 2-day fishing trip. If you are accepted, everything is all the costs of the event itself and the meals and fishing are taken care of. You simply have to get yourself up and back from Lake of the Woods and pay for any drinks and incidentals you get. But we've had great success with the event, and I really believe the magic is veteran having the opportunity to spend time with other veterans. Just really, really good, though. So many nice comments and so many good veterans out there. Everybody's in a different chapter in life, and I think that's one of the things that makes it work. Brett, sometimes the old saying, as the old saying goes, either you need the party or the party needs you, and everybody's in a different place, but it's just good. I can't say enough about it. We also had Midwest Outdoors TV with Greg Jones and a cameraman up filming this year's episode, so you'll be able to see that episode on Midwest Outdoors around Veterans Day. And it was just really special. But I'll tell you what, if you want to apply for next year's event or get an application, we have a website for our event, and it's simply payitforwardlow.org. The LOW, of course, is for Lake of the Woods, and it's a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit, so it's .org. But it's payitforwardlow.org, and we have an application there. Otherwise, you get a hold of myself, Joe Henry, and you can email me or email Lake of the Woods Tourism, and I can certainly get back to you. But good event. Happy to start welcoming veterans to apply for next year's event, and we always look to improve it.
Joe, have you done some research on catching bass for the Fish Donkey tournament coming up at the Aglow Conference at Kentucky Lake in 2 weeks? It's going to be highly competitive. Or are you going to go squirrel hunting?
Yeah. Well, there's some people that are kind of excited because they're going to have a group squirrel hunt through those woods. And if you've ever seen those woods down there in Kentucky Lake, it's like rolling hills of hardwoods. It is really, really beautiful down there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. There's going to be some fishing, obviously some hunting. It sounds like there's a couple of other opportunities that are going to be a surprise for us when we get down there. Of course, we're going to get to see some old friends and make some new ones, and then learn. And there's a couple of things. We just updated the schedule on the Aglow website, by the way. So if you go to aglowoutdoors.com, you'll be able to see the latest schedule update, and of course our new executive director. We're going to be installing our new executive director there, Joe.
Kevin Paulson is a gentleman that's been around, very well respected, super nice guy. And, Mark Smith is our executive director currently. And, Mark never intended to be executive director of Aglow this long, but, he stuck it out for the betterment of the organization. He's been just fantastic. He's given. And, he said, hey, guys, it is time. We need to do a search. And Kevin Paulson, I know you know him, Brett, and spent some time with him. I certainly have too. And super talented guy. He's got a lot of different irons in the fire when it comes to the outdoors. He's got an affiliated marketing company. He has some digital publications with hunting and fishing articles, and just very, very involved in the outdoors. He deals with a lot of outdoor media people, a lot of writers for his own publications, and just a good dude, very credible. And it's going to be fun to have Kevin take the helm. Everybody brings a different lens to leadership and to an organization like this. And Kevin's on the cutting edge of digital and different. We call it, the Association of Great Lakes Outdoor Writers, because that's what it was called originally. But I'll tell you what, we are a very advanced outdoor communicators organization. And ultimately what Aglow does is it brings together outdoor communicators, writers, web developers, videographers, bloggers, YouTubers. Outdoor media specialists, along with outdoor companies, along with conservation organizations like Ducks Unlimited, National Wild Turkey Federation, to give you an example, and along with just other people in the outdoor industry. And by bringing these different stakeholders in the outdoor industry together, it creates some magic. And the cool thing about it is, if you're an outdoor media person and you would be interested in Aglow and all the things it has to offer, to get into this conference isn't very expensive, because the costs are offset by all the sponsorships. To pay for a conference like this, it's $100. To have an annual membership for Aglow, it's $100. And then you just have to pay for your room when you're down in Kentucky. All the meals are provided, happy hours, and a ton of good education. Topics such as AI, how to write a better article, how to store your content more effectively, things that affect us as outdoor communicators, that are cutting edge and makes us better at our craft. And of course, the camaraderie is, Brett, very important.
Yeah, that's what I joke about all the time. Well, you and I have joked about this all the time. All the real work gets done, at the happy hour or in the hospitality suites or wherever. Just the networking aspect to it is amazing. And of course, you have the learn it and do it sessions where you can just hone your craft while you're down there. And I had somebody ask me the other day, they're a young kid with a new YouTube channel in the outdoors, and like, hey, how can I want these brands to send me some of their products, and then I'll use them in the videos and things like that. How can you help me get in touch with those people? And I said, well, for $100, join Aglow, and a lot of those doors will start to open up for you.
Well, even somebody like we talked about, our buddy Ray, who's got a nonprofit,
right?
And Ray
Ruiz.
Yep, Ray Ruiz, and he's got a nonprofit in the Twin Cities. He helps, now,
it's non-English speaking communities. A lot of the Spanish speaking communities. It's Baztec Fishing is what it's called.
And he is, he has a vested interest to be able to tell his story about his nonprofit and get hooked up with these other organizations. For him, does that mean that he'll get more exposure for his nonprofit and his mission? Does it mean that he'll get exposed to grant money or sponsorships that maybe he otherwise wouldn't have? It'll make him a better leader because of the rubbing elbows with some of the top people in America, as well as the education. You can see just one example. But I would say this: if you are in a position, whether you're running an organization in the outdoors, you yourself create outdoor content, you just want to get better. And you might even be in high school or college. There's opportunity for younger people to get into the industry this way. I'll tell you what, I would take a look at it. Take a look at this year's conference. It's a lot of good things happen there. Brent, you talk about rubbing elbows and how where does the real work happen and where do the real relationship happen. I'll tell you what, it's still one of those worlds where people do business with people whom they like and they trust.
Yeah.
And this is where you can develop those relationships. It's amazing. You'll be talking with a guy or a gal at this conference and just very down to earth, nice person. And then you find out what they do and they're director of marketing for a major outdoors company. You know what I mean? It's amazing. It's awesome.
Well, and I don't know how many times, and Joe, you and I have both done this before, but you cold call companies or brands or try to break through those layers to get to the person in charge of making a decision for advertising or marketing or whatever the case may be. And if they don't know you, those walls get put up and fortified, and sometimes it's hard to break those walls down. But when you can do it in a place where we're all gathering to network, like that's the purpose of these things. You know, that's when in this day and age, like you just said, we're still in a world where shaking hands and meeting people, that's where you really start to gain trust and build a relationship with somebody. You can still do a lot in the digital space with emails and phone calls and websites and all of that. But to me, you still have to get to know somebody in person for you really to be able to build some sort of long-term relationship. And this just puts people in the room together to create those types of relationships. So to me, it's priceless.
It's a really good conference. And look how we're speaking about Kevin Paulson and Ray Ruiz, you know, I mean, and it's because of the relationship, because we spent time with those guys that we know how they tick, right?
Yeah, well, we'll look forward. It's going to be kicking off the 22nd, September 22nd at Kentucky Lake. If anybody out there that wants to get into the outdoor world and they want to come and join the conference, you still can. If you wanted to book a room in the Aglow block, by the way, that deadline is, I think it's the 9th or the 10th. I'm going to pull it up here real quick and just make sure. I think it's the 10th. Yeah, September 10th is the deadline for that Aglow negotiated hotel lodging rate. If you want to take advantage of that, you got to do it by the 10th. So come join us, or just join the organization and come join us next year at the next year's conference or one of the many media camps that we have, or just learn with the resources on our website at aglowoutdoors.com. All right, Joe, we'll see you down there at Kentucky Lake. And if people want to book a trip to Lake of the Woods, what should they do?
Hey, check out our website, and that is lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
If you want to catch a big walleye, go where the big walleyes are. Lake of the Woods is the walleye capital of the world, with a variety of resorts and lodging facilities offering full-service fishing. Lake of the Woods is also home to sturgeon, sauger, perch, trophy pike, muskie, smallmouth bass, burbot, and more. Plan your trip to Lake of the Woods today. Go to lakeofthewoodsmn.com. That's lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
All right, we are into it. Fall is not quite officially here, but it feels like it since September 1st rolled around and a bunch of hunting seasons opened up, including our early teal season here in Minnesota. And then the regular season is going to open up, it feels like, real soon. Way too early this year, in my opinion. But I want to talk ducks and waterfowl. John Devney from Delta Waterfowl joins us once again on the show. John, how you doing?
Great. Good to be with you guys. It's that time of year again.
Yeah, going to be 90 degrees again all week here coming up in Minnesota. Doesn't quite feel like water. I mean, I will say, when we got up on September 1st and teal hunted, I think it was around 50 degrees, low 50s. It did actually feel a little bit like hunting season. It was nice out there. And I remember we filmed a video on opener last year, in the early teal opener, and it was going to be 97 degrees that day last year. And it was only 73 this year, so it wasn't so bad, but it's going to be warm again. It doesn't feel, when it's 90 degrees, John, it doesn't feel like duck hunting season yet.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to get in. We've had, here the last couple of weeks, we've had some nice, cool evenings, where you go out training the dog and you're like, wow, I should have a sweatshirt on. And boy, I tell you, it's nice to make that turn from the heat of summer into a few cooler evenings and cooler mornings.
Well, I wanted to have you on to talk about a couple of things. Some more changes in Canada for non-resident hunters. Excuse me. We obviously had some positive news with the duck population numbers being up a bit. We've got wet conditions in some areas, dry conditions in others. So just overall, before we break down some of these things, just overall, how do you think fall is going to be this year, John?
It's pretty interesting, Brett. I mean, I think the good news is you had the Dakotas being really quite wet, and western Minnesota too, for that matter. It wasn't great early, and I think we saw the consequences of that with the distribution of the duck breeding population. But boy, I got to tell you, the ducks that settled in places like southwestern Manitoba, eastern Dakotas, western Minnesota have sure been blessed with great wetland conditions. I was driving around here getting ready for dove season, and I saw water in places that I don't know if I've seen in late August before, and wetland conditions that I guarantee you were better when the ducks came back in sort of late March, mid-April. And I think we had some areas of the prairies that probably had really, really good duck production. But you had a couple of big areas, especially southern Alberta and southern Saskatchewan, frankly, that, they, again, got some water late, but those places have been dry for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah, when we were up there, I know it wasn't as bad as it was, I think, last year, the year before, probably the last couple of years when we've gone through the southern part of Saskatchewan. It's been super dry, and this year it didn't seem like quite as bad. And when we got further north, we saw quite a bit more water and some ducks around. But when you've got the southern part of those two provinces, which are major duck production areas, dry, and then you have all the water in the Dakotas and western Minnesota, we have more ducks around this time of year. Like when we hunted on the first for teal, we had flocks of mallards landing in our decoys, flocks of 30 mallards landing in our decoys. We had wood ducks all around, they're all brown, of course, but, right. And we will see some woodies, but the amount of mallards, you normally see a mallard here and there. We had some other buddies hunting not too far away. They were field hunting for Canada geese, and they had flocks of mallards landing in their decoys. Like it looked like, November hunting to some extent. Right. So what does that mean when all those ducks are here now? They're going to get pressured between the teal season, the early Canada goose season, the regular waterfowl season. We see it every year. The locals get hit pretty hard when the regular season opens up, and then they finally kind of get bumped out of the areas, and then we have to sit and wait, right? So we have to wait for the migrators to start trickling down. Well, how many of these ducks are ducks that we normally see? Are these some of the migrators that we normally see start to trickle?
I don't think so. I mean, I would guess you just, sort of been in pockets where you had really good water conditions this year and probably had really good production. I don't think that's a signal necessarily of, it'd be pretty early for those mallards to be sort of migrating from somewhere north of west central Minnesota.
Well, and I mean, did they even, maybe these are just local birds getting congregated, Minnesota birds getting congregated, and I know ducks like to go back to where they imprint on, but I mean, did we like a reverse migration shortstop because of the dry conditions up there? Do you think ducks just look for other water up there, or do you think we held some ducks?
I think you probably did. As good as water conditions, and even if you didn't hold that many ducks, if they could take advantage of those great wetland conditions and have great production, when you get that water stays in those temporary and seasonal basins through the summer. Remember, that really drives a strong re-nesting rate. So even females that are unsuccessful with their first couple clutches will continue to nest. And we also know that when those seasonal wetlands were wet, like they were across big areas of the eastern Dakotas, southern Manitoba, and western Minnesota this year, that's when we have great duckling survival. So, even if you didn't have that many breeding ducks and they had that great a production, that could be kind of what you're seeing here, especially in these early seasons before they're getting moved around too much.
Boy, that would be the best case scenario, is if our local birds just grew that many new ducks for us. That's what we're seeing around here. And then we still get a big push later in the year, because I don't know. I'm not one of these guys that says early teal and early goose and youth waterfowl and all that are going to ruin it for opening day. But there's only so much gunfire that a duck is going to take, and granted, we weren't shooting at those mallards that we saw on the teal opener, but they were on the water swimming in the pond when we shot at teal. They don't know we're not shooting at them, and they're only going to put up with that for so long. So when you have, granted, we only have 5 days of early teal for now, but there's 5 days of shooting, then there's early, Canada goose for a couple weeks, whatever it is, and then there's youth waterfowl and all that, and then we open up on the 21st. Like how much can those birds take before they really start to, get further and further away from where they've been?
I don't know. You know better what it looks like than I would in West Central Minnesota, but I think teal season's still pretty lightly subscribed over in Minnesota. It's still not a huge deal. I think the early Canada goose season, most of those guys are still hunting in fields. At least I imagine they are. So they're probably, those mallards that are grinding some of those early harvested fields may get bumped off. And, I bet you even the youth waterfowl season, we'd all love to see more kids out there than will probably be out there. So
for sure.
I bet you, in very small areas, the ducks are probably shuffling away from those areas. But, take this 5-day teal season. So you guys open Monday or Sunday?
Sunday, yeah. And
you'll be done on
Thursday?
Yeah. Man, even if you were hunting the same ponds or, in close proximity to those same ponds, those ducks are going to get another nice break before the kids, the few kids are out there. And I don't know.
Kids are this weekend, right?
A bunch of radios on them, but I bet you'd be surprised that those ducks probably aren't just vominosing on that kind of pressure. Opening day in Minnesota, we all saw it. I saw it when I was a kid over there, and that moved some ducks out of the state. But I bet you these special seasons probably are pretty sort of light footprint on the landscape.
Well, and I think they're getting more popular. Granted, we're kind of in an area where there's a lot of waterfowl hunting, but boy, on Saturday it was a duck boat parade going by. I couldn't believe all the duck boats that were going around, and there were definitely some goose hunters that were hunting over water, and there were guys that were hunting both, or they may have hunted a pond, and if a flock of geese came in, they were going to shoot at them for sure. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is there, but I will say, we talked about this before you came on a little bit, but we were hunting some water, and there was another pond next to us that had some kids on it, and we were sitting there watching all the teal swim in our decoys half hour before sunrise, waiting for the legal shooting time of sunrise during the early teal season. And there was all of a sudden, close to, like right after the half hour mark, like the traditional start, the traditional time, gunfire's going off all over the place. And, these kids in the pond next to us were definitely shooting at ducks, before they were legally allowed to. And they got asked, hey, it's a little early. And they're like, well, somebody shot before us, was their answer. It's like, well, that doesn't make it right.
No. Yeah, that's a great answer.
And we saw, and we were looking into the sun, but we passed up on so many shots just because it was so hard to identify some of these birds, and a lot of it was because of the sun. But everything was brown, and we had mallards, we had wood ducks, we had teal, we had gadwall, we had all sorts of ducks flying around. And my thing is a lot of times during early teal, you just let them land and swim into the decoys and see what they look like, and you can make them jump at that point or shoot them. The old not shooting them on the water mentality is, I think that's changed just a little bit, especially when you need to identify your bird. So I don't know. The early teal, it's good to get out there and it's good to have the opportunity. But in my view, John, I would like to see it utilized. If we can have 16 days, right? That's what Central Flyway was approved for, was a 16-day.
Well, you guys are in the Mississippi.
Mississippi, I'm sorry.
Population. So next year, because the blue wing population's down a little bit, I think the Mississippi and Central Flyways are going to have a 9-day teal season.
Okay.
Instead of the 16. You got to have relatively high blue wing numbers to get to a 16-day season. But, yeah, Minnesota could have a 9 or a 16-day teal season.
All right. We got to go to the podcast. So for the rest of this interview, join us on YouTube or download the podcast wherever you get your favorite podcast. But for our radio listeners, we got to go to the podcast portion of the show here with John Devney. So thank you for listening on this radio station right here, and join us wherever you get your podcasts right now. So do you think if that is going to go to a 9-day, do you think Minnesota would ever expand beyond the 5 days? Or do you think, because I know it was a 3-year experimental, it's 3-year experimental seasons. We extended it for a 4th year to do some data collection. There's no data collection during this 4th year of it. Do you think they will continue it as is? Do you think they'll look at numbers, and do you think they'll see anything in any numbers that makes them want to change anything, extend it, remove it? Or do you think, we have the option to go to 2 bonus teal in the Mississippi flyweight as well, don't we? We just chose. Do you think they would ever go to that versus the early teal season?
I think Minnesota, and listen, I recognize it's bar sport all over Minnesota, and I grew up there, so I'm familiar with it. Is everybody can be frustrated with the DNR and how they're managing mille lacs, or how they're managing muskies, or our deer zone should be a quality deer management zone, or our zone shouldn't be a quality deer management zone, and all the rest of that. One thing that I think Minnesota deserves a lot of credit for, and I think Minnesota's been a real leader in this regard, the DNR has been soliciting real feedback from duck hunters. And Brett, you and I would have talked, God, this was a long time ago, when Tom Landwehr was the commissioner, and they had that Waterfowl focus group and had a bunch of stakeholders. And I was flying down from Bismarck to participate in a bunch of those meetings as well. And, I think Minnesota's done a pretty good job of listening to hunters. So the question is what do the majority of Minnesota waterfowl hunters want? I think there was some sort of old line skepticism around teal seasons in Minnesota that I think forced the DNR kind of in this middle space between, a full-fledged, full authority teal season that the feds were offering and what they felt like they could accommodate within the social constraints in Minnesota. I'm hearing from people that people have been more comfortable and been more exposed to the teal season as the experimental seasons are behind us and the data's in. I think probably there's a greater comfort in teal season than there was when this whole concept was knocked around. So ultimately, John Devney's opinion as a guy who lives in North Dakota doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot. What I think it means is, I'm pretty comfortable in saying that I think the Minnesota DNR will be asking those questions of duck hunters and getting feedback. The challenge, of course, I know we're going to probably talk about the duck season structure in Minnesota, is that you have lots of people with lots of different opinions based on where they hunt, how they hunt, and how do you accommodate and optimize seasons, recognizing that there's a subset of hunters that, when the opening weekend of deer season comes and everything's frozen, they're done. And then you have this whole other set of sub hunters.
That's when it's the best.
Right, is taking advantage of big water, field hunting, and all the rest of that stuff. So how, if you're the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources and you operate sort of with good survey information, and again, they're good at asking those questions and they're good about listening to hunters, but how do you accommodate that whole spectrum of hunters? I think it can be a real challenge.
It definitely is a real challenge. There's no doubt. And I'm glad I'm not the one in charge of making those decisions, because I'm sure my mailbox will be full of hate mail. But I think what I would like to see is, if we do have, 9 or 16 days for teal, whatever it is, and if people are getting more comfortable with it, and we have hunters out there that are practicing good duck identification, you extend that a little bit. If people want to have some duck season opportunities in September, we have it with teal and early Canada goose. And normally we don't have all these mallards around. And even the mallards that we have around right now, sure, I would shoot them if I had the opportunity, but I would prefer to shoot them later in the year when they've got some more fat built up, maybe some brighter colors. To me, shooting a brown mallard this time of year, it's not as appealing. I mean, sure, the rush of shouldering your gun and swinging through a bird is great and all of that, but I'm in it so much for the table fare these days. I would much rather have an opportunity at a fattened up late season mallard. Now I know not everybody has the opportunity or the time or wants to drive from the Twin Cities out to western Minnesota where there may be a better chance of late season mallard. Although they got the Mississippi River, they've got some late season mallard opportunities in the Twin Cities and surrounding areas as well. But with 60 days, if we open up on September 1st, the big gripe this year that you probably heard too is that we're going to be closed before Thanksgiving, John. And Thanksgiving historically has been such a great time. People have days off. There's people come home for the holidays, and I don't know how many times out here we've had this friends hunt where we get a bunch of friends that are back in town that don't live here anymore, and they come back. We go out and shoot some geese and shoot some ducks, and it's a great time. And you're shooting migrating birds, you're shooting these big mallards, and if you have the opportunity to hunt them in a field, there's nothing better than that. And that opportunity is just not here. And I don't know how many times on the opener when it's that. In September, that third week of September, that it's 80 some degrees out there, and you're swatting more mosquitoes than you are ducks. And to me, I would just much rather see. And you tell me if you think this would ever be a viable option in Minnesota, but maybe don't open teal on September 1st. Let the dove hunters get out there and chase some doves around. You can push the early teal back just a week later. You can open early Canada goose maybe at the same time and run those the second and third week in September. You can take a week off or so, let the birds get a little bit of a rest, open up that first weekend in October again, and then have 60 days so you can go to the end of November. And that gives people a chance to hunt teal, a chance to hunt geese. You could do your youth waterfowl after those two things close up, so the kids will still have a chance to go out there and do some hunting, and then you give everybody a chance to hunt ducks through September, through October, through November, and then we can start going over to the Central Flyway where you guys have longer seasons or somewhere else at that point.
Well, and the other thing that's different from when I was a kid in Minnesota, we didn't have zones, right? And so you were managing the state. As a whole, you're managing as a whole. And listen, if you're a guy that hunts, Nett Lake, or, my dad had a place up on Sucker Bay of Leech, it's very different than the guy that lives in Wilmer or Owatonna or hunts the Weaver Bottoms, right? So, and again, I think that all that stuff came out of that focus group. And in Tom Landewehr's leadership, I think Minnesota has options to try to optimize all those experiences for all those groups of hunters, right? Because if you hunt at Thief Lake, the fact that some guy that, in Rochester wants to shoot geese or shoot mallards in late November is of particularly no interest to you because Thief's been frozen since, November the 4th. So, the good news is Minnesota has those tools at their discretion. And again, I think, this year's a particularly odd one because this is the latest that Thanksgiving can legally be. Or legally is.
I know what you mean.
About Thanksgiving. But it's the latest Thanksgiving we can ever have, right? So it's this confluence of little earlier duck opener, crazy late Thanksgiving has sort of caught a lot of folks in the lurch. And I get it, and they're frustrated. What I would say is when the Minnesota DNR sends you a survey,
fill it out.
Fill it out.
Yeah. I don't think
because they're asking and they want to take input, and they're going to do the best they can to accommodate all that range of perspectives.
Yeah, and I've got my issues with the DNR, but I don't really take issue with the way they've managed waterfowl necessarily. There's a couple of things I don't like, but I think they have really listened to the hunters out there. And I think, to your point about the survey, because I've gone back and forth with people on social media about this, is for those of us that want a later season, we're either actually the minority or we've been the vocal minority, because they've had more people on the survey say they want to hunt ducks, earlier in the season in the surveys. But I think a lot of those guys that want to hunt later just never, I never saw a survey, or didn't take the time to fill it out, or weren't paying attention.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example. My dad had this place up at Sucker Bay Leech, but my dad had this incredible aversion to being out duck hunting when the deer season was happening. So that duck camp closed every year at the end of October, the Sunday before the Minnesota rifle opener. And if you went back in time, and I probably still have my old log books from when I used to hunt up there. The guys had cleaned, shut down the camp, winterize it, everything else. But I'd typically go hunt that opening weekend of deer season, because I knew that was probably going to be the best weekend or two of duck hunting at Leech. And I didn't have the same aversion to being out there in my boat that my dad did when the guys, the Orange Army, was present. And so, but again, if you're a guy that hunts Thief or Leech or Winnie or those places, having a bunch of days left after November 10th doesn't do much for you, right? And that's an important tradition and culture of waterfowl hunting in Minnesota.
I've heard, and I think you're onto something with the deer season. I think so many people deer hunt. When you're talking about 500,000 to 600,000 people out there that strap on the orange, that's a big chunk of your waterfowl hunters that don't care about waterfowl anymore at that point. And it's too bad, because I love shooting deer. Don't get me wrong, but I bow hunt more, so I've got a lot of deer hunting in already before the gun season opens. But it's such a good time to hunt waterfowl. Yeah. And I remember a couple years ago, I was living in Fargo, but I was hunting in Minnesota, and I was actually chasing a big buck in Minnesota. And I was bow hunting, but it was during the gun season, and I was in the stand, and I'd sat there all morning, and some guys were hunting the property next to me, and I could hear them talking on their cell phones, and they were coughing. And I mean, they weren't that close to me, but they were being so noisy that they might as well have been in the stand with me. And I was like, and then there was a lake next to me that was full of ducks and geese. And I said, what am I doing? Like, I'm doing the wrong thing here. So I climbed down, and at lunch, I had a bag of decoys in the back of my truck, and I went to a WMA, and I threw some decoys out at lunch and shot a handful of ducks and a couple of geese, and then went back and climbed into my stand for the afternoon. So it's such a good time. It's such a great opportunity for waterfowl hunters and for guys, if you want. I mean, sure, it can be a little bit colder out there, but if you're talking about introducing people to waterfowl hunting, sure, taking them out there when it's warm is nice, and being able to shoot a couple of teal, great. But if you want to bring somebody out there to show them the spectacle of 5,000 Canada geese, circling a cornfield, or 1,000 mallards, like there's nothing better than field hunting mallards in November, and you get big swarms of them, like your snow goose hunting almost. That will open up a lot of eyeballs and get people jacked up about waterfowl hunting, I think. And granted, that's more of a thing in the Dakotas than Minnesota, but we have that here. But a lot of times the season is closed for us. So I like the waterfowl zones. I thought that was great when they put the zones in. I've talked to a handful of people from the north that say, leave the seasons where they're at because we freeze up. A couple of people have told me that they hunt Leech or Lake of the Woods, and sometimes they do have some late season opportunities up there in the big water when the season is closed. But I was a little surprised when the southern zone split became the same as the central zone.
Right.
I would have preferred to see that a little bit longer. I don't mind a longer split. If we're going to open in September, I don't mind a longer split even for us. And granted, we're pretty close to the southern zone, so we're almost in that area. But we usually have a pretty good lull at the beginning of October as it is. So I'd rather have a longer split there and go a little bit later. So I thought that the zones were great. I was surprised at the changes they made to them.
Yeah.
But
no, I I've got real confidence, especially in the Minnesota DNR, and they've done great work with good social scientists at the University of Minnesota, that they're going to do a great job of asking for feedback, and hunters need to express their opinion on everything, right? And including, what the future of the teal season looks like as well.
So let's move on from Minnesota just a little bit. I want to talk about what's going on in Canada, because a lot of us do travel to Canada to hunt, and it seems like that is changing every year. There's more and more changes to non-resident hunting opportunities up there. But before we do that, let's just touch on pintails real quick, because the framework around pintail limits has changed recently, correct?
Yep, they did. It's work that a number of us have been urging the service to do for quite a long time, which is sort of revisit their assumptions and models around pintail. And as you know, this summer they announced they were, resetting sort of the policy frameworks to provide the opportunity for a third pintail in the bag. I was frankly, when that first came out, I think there were lots of people that said, holy cow, we're going to be able to shoot 3 pintails next year. And I told a lot of people, I said, don't be so certain about that, because nobody's seen the biological parameters and where those thresholds are for, a 1 pintail limit, a 2 pintail limit, or a 3 pintail limit. But based on the biological modeling, even with the pintail numbers not being particularly good this year, the service is authorizing the flyways to go to 3 pintails for the 25 season. And boy, that's going to be welcome news to a number of folks.
Yeah, and I think it was in that article from Paul Waite there that I read, were there some outdated methods of determining population estimates, or something changed?
No, it's listen, science is always best when you're collecting new data. And what happened is the old way of, sort of figuring out what's allowable harvest, informed by a bunch of new data since the pintail strategy had originally been done in the early 2000s, basically just said, we're not as concerned about pintail harvest now as we were back then. So it's based on how pintails are responding to harvest, how many we're harvesting. I mean, listen, we're killing a hell of a lot less ducks today than we were in the early 2000s, just because we've got less hunters in the field. And less super black eagles means we kill less. It just flat does. And so, it wasn't that the service was negligent. It wasn't that there was a flaw. It's just the benefit of new and improved modeling capability and new data that the more contemporary data that informed where we are today versus the information they were dealing with when the last pintail harvest strategy was developed.
So as you talk about hunter population numbers dwindling, as Scott Mockington said in a recent article, a lot of the older hunters are aging out, which is, I think, where you're seeing a big drop in waterfowl hunters out there. We don't need more restrictions on hunters as it is, and it seems like in Canada, what is going on? Because it seems like every year there's another province making changes to non-resident hunting opportunities, and this year Alberta made some changes up there, John.
Yep. Yeah, Alberta went to 2 7-day periods, and I'll just take a bit of exception, Brett, with how you frame that. And the reason I'm going to say that is because I think whether you're the state of Minnesota, you're the state of North Dakota, you're the province of Alberta, the province of Manitoba, the state of Arkansas, those people are managing for the benefit of their resident sportsmen, right? The sportsmen and women. And if you look at the statistics, whether you look at North Dakota or Manitoba, Saskatchewan or Alberta, if you're a non-resident, if you're a guy from North Dakota going to Alberta or a guy from Minnesota going to Manitoba or Saskatchewan, over 90% of those hunters are there for 7 days or less. And so when you look at, what Manitoba did a couple of years ago, which is really sort of been muted by the fact that I don't think anybody that's applied for a license in Manitoba hasn't gotten one the last 2 years. Alberta isn't going to have a draw. It's going to be, up to 2 7-day periods. I think that what they're doing is providing the continued freelance opportunity without the potential for expanded sort of folks having a footprint or folks potentially illegally outfitting. So,
sure.
I mean, the key for me in all these scenarios, whether we're talking about Arkansas or Kansas or North Dakota or Manitoba or Alberta or Saskatchewan, is how do we continue to have places where the average Joe duck hunter can continue to go? And at least so far in the what's happened in Manitoba, and I think even a little more liberal regulations in Alberta, I don't think the desires of the sort of traditional freelance prairie hunter will be severely compromised by that.
Okay, well that's good, because that is a bit of a worry, and as it continues, as things continue to change, and don't get me wrong, like I don't mind when a state or province protects its residents, because those are the people living there. They're the ones paying taxes. They're the ones that are ingrained in the communities there. But I mean, how long have we been talking about what the economic impact is of some of these hunters? And sure, and honestly, to your point, if most hunters are only going for less than 7 days as it is, then why put any restriction on them at all? Why is there a need?
I think it's really about, Brett, it's, the thing about, as we were waist deep in the Manitoba thing because we got, a little startled by that just like everybody else did.
Right.
I think what Manitoba was concerned about is, and remember, Manitoba pretty intentionally managed their guides and outfitters through that process too, right? Like we've heard freelance hunters concerned about it, but really, it was guiding and outfitting that was really intensively managed through that process more than anything. But I think when you look at the resource as it sits today, and you look at the way that it has been more and more competitive, opportunity to have quote unquote high quality duck hunting has been more competitive. Well, I'd say really across the prairies. I think everybody acknowledges and appreciates the authentic freelance hunter who comes up, has great hunting, and goes home. What they don't want is folks that are coming up and illegally guiding. And what they also are not eager to have is folks from the States come up, build lodges, and start tying up access, right? And so I think that is, you're right. I mean, if, the likelihood of folks going to Alberta and buying that second license is less than 10% of the population. But the good news is if you're in a situation where you were thinking about, maybe I'm just going to have an Instagram page and I might sell a few hunts in Alberta, you're not going to do that anymore. Right? You're not going to do it in Manitoba anymore. And so I think the hope is to flatten out the opportunity for resident hunters, but also I think, Brett, guys like you and I, that 20 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, I'll be pretty freaking old, but 15 years from now, we're still going to have a place where we can go and freelance hunt because all the access and opportunity isn't going to be tied up by commercial interests or private or, sort of lodge owner types.
Well, so that I mean, and I totally understand that, and I don't want to. I would love to see a crackdown on the illegal guiding, but for guys like us that have the opportunity, sorry, we're keeping you a little long here, John.
No, that's fine.
For guys like us that have the opportunity to go, like we've got some time. I've got a couple trips to Saskatchewan planned this year, and thankfully Saskatchewan hasn't really changed much. And I know I'm kind of in the minority that I have the opportunity to do multiple trips, and it's probably just gonna be me and Dan most of the time hunting. We're not, I've got my family. I'm bringing my let's see, how old is he now? He's 84. My 84-year-old dad is coming up. Yeah. And we're going to try to find the place that he hunted in 1956 when he was 16 years old this year. And we're going to try to film something about his journey back. So I understand wanting to protect local businesses, the local guides, and crack down on illegal guiding, and make sure that there's access for people for generations to come. I totally have no issues with that. But do you think there'd be a way to try to enforce that more versus trying to limit the number of days a freelancer could hunt up there? I'm trying to figure out if there's a better answer.
I think enforcement is a really important part of it. It was pretty central to the comments that we sent to the Manitoba government. And no, it's a huge part of it. But the reality is, the Ministry of Natural Resources in Manitoba ain't getting another 25 conservation officers anytime soon, right? And I think there's a conversation going on right now about targeted enforcement in Manitoba, and I think it needs to happen there. I think it needs to happen in Saskatchewan. I think it needs to happen in Alberta. But the reality of it is, if you can accommodate well over 90% of the hunters with a term license or two, and you do targeted enforcement, I think that's the policy lever that they think they're gonna throw. And again, I don't know that I'm going to be in Manitoba or Saskatchewan this fall. I also know that based on my job and my family and everything else, about 5 days is about as much as I can muster.
Yeah.
And so, again, I think the key is, it wasn't that long ago, Brett, that you might recall the Saskatchewan Guides and Outfitters proposed that no American freelance hunting should occur. Yeah. It all should go through Guides and Outfitters.
Well, that's why I'm afraid that's where it's going to end up.
I don't think so. I don't think so. If you look at, there's no signal of that in Alberta. There's no signal of that in Manitoba. In fact, Manitoba capped their Guides and Outfitters as part of this modernization package too. So sort of the early conversations we've had with folks in Saskatchewan, there's no desire to do that to freelance hunters there either. So no, I fundamentally disagree that that's what is driving this. This is about local hunters saying, golly gee whiz, we live here, to be nice for us to be able to have a place to duck hunt.
Well, and just kind of looking at that and expanding on that thought a little bit, and even down here in the States when it comes to, illegal guiding or unlicensed guides. I know in North Dakota you have to have a license. Right now in Minnesota you don't. I don't think you do in South Dakota for the most part.
South Dakota doesn't have a huge guiding and outfitting community because they have very restrictive draws in term licenses, right? So they've sort of self-regulated their guiding and outfitting through different means.
Well, and what I would like to see, and I'd have no problem with it, the one thing I do like about what Saskatchewan and some of the Canadian provinces have done is limit, as you said, they capped some of the numbers of guides in an area, and in Saskatchewan they have zones, and you can only have so many guides in each zone. They only get so many days to guide on. I would have no problem seeing that down here in the States. Now, I know I don't want to put more restrictions on business necessarily, but if you could eliminate so much drama, by capping the number of guides in an area and the amount of days they can guide on, and that would maybe improve some freelance access too. And when you talk about dwindling numbers, John, I think there's a couple of things at play there when you say there's not as many waterfowl hunters anymore. And one is the fact that some are aging out. But two, and this goes across the board on so many levels when it comes to hunting, is the access there is getting limited because a lot of land is getting leased up. And then the way you hunt waterfowl has changed so much over the years. Out at Lac Parle back in the 80s and 70s, 80s and 90s, when you'd have just hundreds of hunters just lining the refuge, sitting in ditches in blue jeans, shooting at geese. They were waterfowl hunters. They were buying licenses and stamps. So those days are gone. Everybody's got big trailers with field spreads now, and there's only so many fields you can get into. That access is another reason that those numbers are dropping as well.
If let's be honest, Brett, if we're talking about Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta in the 1970s, I don't think we'd be having this conversation.
No, probably not.
Because there's no conflict over bulrush points in Saskatchewan or Manitoba.
Right.
This is all about guys wanting to hunt, chasing gold at the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and everybody having dreams of having thousands of mallards and specks and Canadas and snows landing on their feet in the pea stubble. And that's where, candidly, we went back to duck hunting the way I still duck hunt, which is spend a lot of time in cattail marshes with wet, stinky Labradors and not a lot of time. I've just gotten to the point where, again, with the restrictions on my time, I don't have the time to chase the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And I don't want to deal with the conflict, and I don't want to be in fields at 2:30 in the morning. I'm too old for all that crap.
Right.
And if we all went back to duck hunting the way we used to hunt ducks, we wouldn't be having this conversation in any three of the prairie provinces. But you and I both know when it's that resource, which is a high quality mallard, snow goose, Canada, speckled belly field, there's not an infinite supply of those to go around. There just isn't.
No, and everybody is, you're right. Everybody's hunting the same way now and chasing that. And this is for a different conversation, but that, even between freelancers, the drama that comes from chasing the same feed or something like that, and maybe I'm getting older too, but, we hunted pretty easy on opener. I've got, a blind spot outdoors blind set up in my pond, and we rolled out there at sunrise, threw out, what did we throw out, 15 decoys or something, Dan?
Yep.
We weren't out there trying to fight the crowds, trying to beat somebody to a bulrush point or try to shoot, we're just going to pound them today and shoot as many as we can. We just wanted to go shoot a couple of birds, watch the sunrise over the slough, smell the stinky labs, and just enjoy duck hunting, So and when it comes to like my Saskatchewan hunting too, a lot of times I don't chase feeds. I might chase a feed here and there, but a lot of times I've got a couple of fields that are great migrator fields, and they rotate based on crops, and we set up a spread and we sit in it, and we set a spread and might hunt it for a week. We don't bounce around as much, and it's real low key, easy hunting. We're sitting on chairs and A-frames, and we shoot birds. I don't need to kill 100 of them. I don't need that big stack. Sure, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see the big swarms buzzing around and getting the barrels hot. But, my idea of shooting a big stack is, it's not a priority for me anymore. But it's I think the culture, I'm worried a little bit. Dan and I talked about this the other day off air, but I'm worried a little bit about the culture because of some of the drama you get when guys are chasing the same feed, and you got these young kids racing each other down gravel roads to try to get to a spot or try to knock on a farmer's door or whatever, and and everybody's got to have the pile. They're still doing pile pics on social media a little bit, and I'm worried about the priorities of some of these guys, and if that's another reason why some people are getting turned off from the sport.
Well, if it's your only objective in life is to post a big pile of dead stuff on Instagram, you're willing to go to any means necessary to do that, man, you're going to beat me to it because I just don't care that much.
Right. Exactly.
I love eating ducks. But you know what? I don't need to fight you for that field to get enough ducks for me and my wife and kids to eat. I don't need it. So if you're gonna bully around and you're gonna sleep in the field and you're gonna do all that stuff, or you're gonna pay you're going to lease and tie it up and all the rest of that stuff, I'm not your competition. I'm out. I'm going to be in a cattail marsh somewhere.
Yeah. All right. John, obviously we could sit and probably keep talking about this for hours, but I'm going to let you go. But I really appreciate the time today. I love having you on to talk waterfowl. Let's do it again. Good luck wherever you're going to be this fall. And if you want to come up, I'll probably have a spot in an A-frame if you want to come up and sit on a chair this fall in Saskatchewan somewhere.
Unfortunately, my trips to Saskatchewan, I think that's going to have to be a retirement mission for me. I never seem to be able to make the time happen. But wishing you guys the best. Hopefully we'll get a chance to catch up during the season.
All right. John Devney, Delta Waterfowl, thanks for coming on the show.
All right. See you guys.
Sporting Journal Radio is a division of Macaba LLC. If you've got a question, comment, or story idea for us, send us an email. Go to sportingjournalradio.com. While you're there, you can learn how to advertise on the show and visit our store for hats, hoodies, coffee mugs, and more. Go to sportingjournalradio.com.